La delegación de Filipinas.
The delegation of the Philippines has a point of order. I understand you've asked for the floor for a point of order. Is that correct?
Thank you.
Quisiera consultar.
I'd like to ask you a question. Philippines, do you have a point of order?
Yes, we do, Madam Chair.
I need the English.
Thank you for the floor. This is not with reference to the preamble. This is with reference to the new paragraph 6 in document conference point 229/2017/L.X.
Estimada delegada,
Distinguished delegate, what you are indicating is not a point of order. It's an issue of substance, and it's not being considered by the conference at this time. At this time, the conference is considering the issue of the preamble. My question to the room is if the conference prepared to agree to the preamble of the treaty ad referendum.
las delegaciones que están
Delegations asking for the floor. I would like to ask if there are any objections to the issue being considered before you at this time, and that is the preamble to the treaty. Are there any objections to the preamble?
la delegación.
The delegation of Egypt has the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and let me at the outset thank you and your team for all of the tremendous hard work and efforts which you have exerted in producing this final draft. Indeed, my delegation has an issue with PP19. Several delegations, including my own, had suggested the redrafting of preambular paragraph 19 regarding the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty to avoid its factual inaccuracy. Some proposals to reformulate the preambular paragraph were suggested to reflect the current state of the CTBT as a treaty that has yet to enter into force. We hope that such alternative language is replaced to ensure accuracy and correctness. And therefore, we urge you, Madam President, to ensure that the notion of the CTBT's entry into force is incorporated in PP19. Thank you.
Hemos tomado nota de la.
We have taken note of the statement made by Egypt. I give the floor to the Netherlands.
Consulto a la delegación de.
I'd like to ask the delegation of the Netherlands. Did you have?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you for all the hard work you put into this text, and also, of course, thanks colleagues for all their constructive consultations of the last 3 weeks. Unfortunately, at this stage, my delegation is not in a position to support the preamble as it stands. We still believe it is not in line with the advisory opinion of the ICJ, which we suggested. I will not make our specific text proposals to that with regards to that. And also with regards to the relation with the MPT, that's a major concern to us. We will return to that during our consultations during today. In its current format, the treaty supersedes the MPT, according to, in our view, and while it actually should complement the MPT. We have in that regard, 2 proposals that we are ready to put forward. but I'm not sure if you want to go that direction immediately. I mean, your hand's there. But one would at least be to bring PP 15 also into line with the NPT by putting that article basically establishing that that article is in the framework of Article 6 of the NPT. I would also like to repeat that we made a suggestion in the course of our proceedings with regards to a new PP, because we strongly believe that the NPT has more than a vital role to play. There should be no doubt that the NPT will remain central to our non-proliferation and disarmament regime. And we will, it's in the compilation document already. We'd like to repeat that we think in the PPs there should be a reaffirming of the commitments of the state parties to the full and effective implementation of the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. I'm in your hands with regards to how to deal with text proposals, but I would like to flag this at this stage. Thank you.
Le agradezco a la delegación.
I thank the delegation of the Netherlands. I'd just like to say that the time for those considerations already ended. That was during the last few weeks up to the 15th of June. Those considerations were to be put on the table, and we are currently discussing agreement ad referendum of the text that you have before you. The delegation of Kazakhstan has the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, for all your efforts and the new draft distributed last Monday. We have no objections for preamble, but we have a very slight and we see it easy addition to the last part of preamble. After the word Hibakusha, we want to add "and victims of testing of nuclear weapons," as it in para 6 or 7, the first para of the second page, where we're talking about Hibakusha as well as of those affected by testing of nuclear weapons. Because we believe that not only the Hibakusha but also other victims of testing, they made all of their efforts for a goal of total elimination of nuclear weapons. We hope that you will amend these changes very easy and slightly. Thank you.
Le agradezco a la delegación.
I thank the delegation of Kazakhstan. I'd just like to remind delegations that the time to negotiate proposals has taken place. There were many spaces for discussions. Many proposals were put on the table. Many were discussed. The text that we have before us at this time reflects the best compromise and combination of all proposals that were presented during the conference. At this time, we are no longer considering proposals that were already discussed in working sessions and in plenary. At this time, we are working to agree ad referendum on the text that we have before us. As I said before, this text is the best possible result of the deliberations that the conference has been holding. State of Palestine has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. We had commended the many changes to the preambular paragraphs that had occurred, including the fact that we have now a paragraph on nuclear weapon-free zones. We believe that was positive. We had said, and we still have a problem with the language on arrangements freely arrived at among the states, or any language that gives a contrary signal to the purpose of this treaty about the freedom based on sovereignty or rights of states to have nuclear weapons that runs against the signal we want to be giving. However, after intensive consultations, we will not oppose the adoption of the preamble in its current form, including with this language, in order to be constructive and move forward. And I want to seize this opportunity to say that Palestine is against nuclear weapons anywhere, regardless of their possessors. And when we make such comments, we would be advocating the same positions, even if Israel, the occupying power, did not have nuclear weapons, because we firmly believe in a certain number of principles that lead to our conclusion that the existence of nuclear weapons is incompatible with these principles. But we think we have a responsibility here to the Hibakusha, to all victims, and to all humanity to try and move forward, and therefore also in appreciation of the membership and yourselves' efforts to allow for the state of Palestine to be among you today, we will be constructive and accept the preamble as it is while having this reservation.
Le agradezco a la delegación del Estado.
I thank the delegation of the State of Palestine. We have taken note of your statement, which will also be recorded. The delegation of Austria has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. And I too want to thank you and your team for all the efforts that you have displayed. And indeed, we have been now negotiating for 3 weeks, and we have to come to an end. And your text that you have proposed, for example, here on the preambular part, certainly reflects the broadest possible common denominator that we have here. And I understand that, of course, some delegations still feel the need to flag that some of their proposals could not have been included. And I want to commend my colleague from Palestine, who very clearly said, I do not want to stand in the way for the adoption. And I think that's about the spirit that we have to take at this very late hour. And therefore, we think that the proposals that were made now, be it by Egypt or the Netherlands, I think they do not reflect the outcome of the hard work on those issues of the facilitation of the many rounds that we had. And my delegation, therefore, wants to maintain the language as it stands. Thank you.
Le agradezco a la delegación.
I thank those delegations that have taken the floor on the issue of the preamble. We'll continue now then with Article 1. It is my understanding that the conference agrees to Article 1.
La delegación de Irán tiene un...
The delegation of Iran has a point of order. Is that so?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Madam President. Not indeed. I would like to comment on the preamble part, with your permission.
Le digo al...
I would say to the distinguished delegate of Iran, there's a delegation requesting the floor for a point of order. We'll hear about the point of order first. The delegation of the Netherlands has the floor.
I would still like to make an intervention on the preamble, also because my delegation was addressed, and I would like to respond to that, if you allow me. Yeah, thank you. I would like to reiterate that at this moment our delegation is not in a position to agree at referendum to the text before us for the reasons I've just explained. And while appreciating the comments made by our distinguished colleague from Austria, I would also like to note, while he says that this is the outcome of the consultations, in our view, this outcome does not reflect our fundamental concerns. And I ask the indulgence also from our Austrian and other delegations of that position. Fundamental concerns. Thank you very much.
La delegación de
The delegation of Brazil has requested the floor, followed by the Philippines. Brazil?
Thank you, Madam President, and we also wish to thank you and all the facilitators who have worked under your guidance strenuously during the last weeks to find the best text possible for consideration at this final moments of our conference that has lasted for 3 weeks. I think this is an exceptional conference in the sense that we have an allotted period of time that is not particularly long to decide upon issues that are of huge relevance, I think, for the world and our future. Of course, the preamble, if we were each of us to write it, we would have written it in as many different ways as there are members present in this conference. So the idea here is to find convergence and a common denominator, which is the work that I believe you have facilitated and carried out with great competence and success. We would obviously wish to tweak and improve some of the preambular paragraphs, including some in a direction that has been mentioned by a delegation that spoke previously. But we also understand that to do this at this point in time, of course, would be placing at risk an important and fundamental outcome for a conference such as this one that we do not wish to put at risk at this moment. So I think the spirit is to find, figure out whether this is a text that is worth supporting and that is worth living with for the greater objective of the prohibition of nuclear weapons and for opening a pathway towards their total elimination, which I think it's it's a long-standing objective of the international community since the UN was founded and we had our first resolution. And this is what we're here to support. And in this sense, we have full confidence in you and in those who facilitated and in the fact that this is most certainly the best possible text under the current circumstances that we were given by the resolution of the General Assembly. So at this point in time, we are willing to support the text as is because we think that opening it up for small improvements will simply jeopardize the possibility of adopting a treaty on Friday. And in this sense, we would call on all members to have the same sort of spirit of convergence and conciliation and flexibility that will allow us to make this historic breakthrough during the course of our 3-week-long conference. Thank you very much.
Le agradezco.
I thank the delegation of Brazil. I'd just like to recall for the conference what I was saying at the beginning of this plenary session. The text we have before us is the best possible compromise and represents all the discussions, conversations, and work that we've had in this conference since it started. And that would include the session in March where delegations had an opportunity to put their preferences and visions on the table. Obviously, the final text of every treaty reflects the collective work. Otherwise, each treaty would be 15,000 pages long to reflect the preferences and words of each delegation. So this text is the best possible compromise. And so I would ask that we work in a spirit of compromise to adopt this text on Friday. That is the will of the conference at this time, as the conference indicated. I give the floor to the delegation of Iran.
Thank you, Madam President. My delegation is thankful to you and all facilitators who did their best during the last working days of the conference to improve the text of the draft treaty. As a result, in our view, some part of the text has been improved. However, I would like to put on record that to develop a legally binding instrument that is sound, robust, accurate, implementable, and void of any shortcoming, the text still needs further work. In our view, the preamble was improved. For instance, it comprehensively addresses almost all aspects of the catastrophic humanitarian use of nuclear weapons. Nevertheless, it still lacks addressing other concepts, such as declaring that any use of nuclear weapons is a crime against humanity. As this concept has been recognized and reaffirmed by the United Nations General Assembly for decades and is directly related to the subject matter of the treaty, its absence is a shortcoming. Due to the legal and political and moral importance of this concept, it needs to be included in the treaty, particularly taking into account that neither in the plenary of the conference nor in its closed meetings or informal consultation, none of the participant delegates objected to its inclusion. Likewise, lack of a clear reference to the prohibition of threatening to use nuclear weapons under international law in the preamble is another consideration in this part where the object and purpose of the treaty is defined. With these views and comments, I would like to put on record we will not stand in the way of consensus if there is any. And once again, I would like to thank you, Madam President.
Le agradezco a la delegación.
I thank the delegation of Iran for this contribution and for their flexibility. We have taken on board your statement and taken note of your flexibility so as to reach a consensus. South Africa.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me join others in congratulating you and thanking you for steering this process as astutely as you have and having brought us as far as you have. We'd also like to thank the facilitators for the good work that they did and to echo the sentiments expressed by Brazil that, as we said last week, if South Africa was negotiating on its own, alone, in a room, we would get 100% of what we want. But we're cognizant of the fact that we're engaging in an intergovernmental process with other countries. It's a process of give and take, an incredible process of democracy. At the end of the day, we have to live with what the general will of the people say and accept it, even if there are shortcomings. So we join others in accepting the preamble. There's so much more that we would have wanted to have. As a state party that was responsible for the indefinite extension of the NPT, there's so much we wanted to load into this text on the NPT. There is so much. But we understand the enormity of the task and the restraint that it imposes, the discipline that it requires of us in being restrained in what we pack into the document. So, Madam Chair, we are a part of the consensus that accepts the document. Outcomes of multilateralism are never 100% perfect. No treaty is perfect and has no loopholes. We continue as multilateralists to strive to do better. And I think in this case, we exhibited that intention. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Le agradezco a la delegación.
I thank the delegation of South Africa, and I now give the floor to Ireland.
Thank you, Madam President. With your permission, could I start by welcoming the presence of our dear friend Setsuko Thurlow here today. It's very special, I think, to have her with us in the room as we conclude our important work since she has played such a significant part in all that has gone before. My delegation thanks you for the careful drafting of the preamble. We do believe it is broadly reflective of our deliberations, and like the whole text, it is finely balanced. My delegation can therefore accept the preamble as currently drafted. There will, of course, always be issues we would like to see added or further refined. However, as you have said, we are seeking compromise and convergence here, and we have witnessed that very constructive spirit in the facilitations to great effect. So we hope to see it here too in the interest of our shared goal, which is, after all, the reason we are all here, as has been so eloquently expressed just now by a number of delegations, including Palestine and Brazil and South Africa and many others. Thank you, Madam President.
Le agradezco a la delegación.
Thank you, Ireland. I now give the floor to Chile. I will be very brief, Madam President. First, I would like to thank you for your efforts, and I also wish to state that Chile is quite pleased to be able to align itself with the proposal made by Brazil, by the State of Palestine, by South Africa, and by Ireland. They have all said quite eloquently that what we are trying to do now is extremely important politically, and we must bring our ranks together towards this goal, which is undoubtedly superior to any national needs that we might have. We have a goal here. If things were perfect in the world, then we would have everything we want. But we have what we have before our eyes, and this is why we are willing to accept what we have right now. Thank you.
La delegación de Chile tiene.
Thank you, Chile. Liechtenstein, followed by Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Let me thank you and your team and everybody who has contributed to the text before us for presenting us with this text, which takes us very close to the goal we have been pursuing together over the past weeks and, in fact, over the past decades. As others, we would like, of course, given a choice, to see other elements in the preamble, and not only in the preamble, but also in the treaty as a whole, where we see areas where we could have seen a better outcome from our perspective, but we also realize that the perspective of others is different, and that we are here to try and forge a consensus on this truly historic project. With that in mind, I would like to associate my delegation with those that have spoken in favor of agreeing to the preamble as you have presented it to us. Delegations from Chile, South Africa, Brazil, Ireland, and others. And by way of more general comment on the text, this is also how we are looking at the text as a whole. There are things that we do not particularly like in the provisions that follow, and I think these elements are well known in the room. But we hope that we can move expeditiously to agreeing on a text and only look at issues that emerge as a result of facilitation that can be included into the draft that you have given us. So we are happy to agree to the preamble as you have proposed it and hope that others will do the same. Thank you.
Le agradezco.
I thank the delegation of Liechtenstein. The next delegations will be having the floor, and after that we close the list of speakers on this topic of the preamble: Nigeria, Kazakhstan, Cuba, and Indonesia. I give the floor to the delegation of Nigeria.
Thank you, Madam President, and good morning. Madam President, the delegation of Nigeria would like to first and foremost commend your efforts and that of your team, including the beautiful work, onerous one, by the facilitators. Madam Chair, indeed, you stated that we have reached a historic point, and that was what happened all the while. It was a historic point that we could even get this resolution put together, and then we are here to negotiate this very treaty. Madam Chair, as has been said and highlighted by so many delegations this morning, we believe that what we have here before us might not necessarily mean the best. After all, as we said during one of the plenary sessions, this is not 2+2. And at any rate, delegations will have one thing or the other to raise. As a matter of fact, we're not totally happy with the way Preamble Para 18 on MPT. We already said that we have toiled, we have labored so much for NPT without any meaningful result. But you have also reflected NPT in a beautiful way, more beautiful than what we will. We thought it shouldn't have been done that way, but that is the way you saw it. And we want to agree wholeheartedly with you on this. It is on this note we believe that time is of the essence. We have 1 day left. And I'm not even sure we have that day left, but let us assume that we have 1 day left. This is not the time to begin to look for substantive issues and opening all kinds of articles and paragraphs. But we believe that you have done well, and we also believe that going forward you are able to move us in good direction. So we are satisfied with what we have, and as has been said often, compromise does not mean total, irrefutable, to not contest issues, but to say that, okay, we can live by this, and we can live with the preamble we have right now, despite the fact that it is not perfect. I thank you, Madam President.
Agradezco.
I thank the delegation of Nigeria. Kazakhstan has the floor, followed by Cuba.
Thank you, Madam Chair, again. I apologize for taking floor second time. We would like to underline that our proposal not some substantial. It is but logical and even technical. If in one para we are talking about, along with the Hibakusha, about the victims of testing, it is logically that in the following paras we also will continue this line. And I would like to remind all of this room that in Kazakhstan we have 1.5 million affected people by testing, by holding testing. And these people, they are the core, the heart of anti-nuclear movement in Kazakhstan. And their support also should be highlighted in this treaty. In this regard, we hope that you will accept our logical and technical proposal. Thank you.
Agradezco a Kazajstán.
I thank Kazakhstan, and I now give the floor to Cuba. Thank you very much, Madam President. First and foremost, on behalf of the Cuban delegation, I'd like to express our gratitude to you and to your whole team and the Secretariat for the excellent work done. The draft that you're presenting us with, in our view, is the result of a long process that's not limited just to the most recent few weeks. It is the result, we think, of a process that's taken more than 70 years in order to get to the point that we're currently at now. The text that you've presented us is not an ideal text, and clearly it does not reflect the positions of Cuba in their entirety. However, at the same time, we do believe that the historic responsibility that all of us here in this conference must shoulder is such that we need to go well beyond our preferences. especially our national preferences. And in that spirit, we'd like to state for the record that in the view of the Cuban delegation, the preamble should have included a paragraph whereby it would explicitly indicate the need to strictly respect environmental standards in implementing this treaty. Moreover, we'd like to state for the record that in Cuba's view, paragraph 19 should have made a specific reference to the entry into force of the CTBT. Having said that, and with a view to not jeopardizing the work on this treaty in the last few hours of this conference, Cuba will not insist on these proposals unless, of course, discussions are reopened on the substance of the text. Thank you very much, Madam President. I thank the delegation of Cuba. I give the floor to the delegation of Indonesia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me begin by joining others in thanking you for preparing the draft that we have now. On the preambles, even though we would have wished to have a more stronger provisions by including so many amendments that has been put forward by distinguished delegation, including the last one by Cuba. But my delegation cognizance of the fact that we wish that we are going to have a consensus-based formula as well as on the time constraint and also to keep the momentum. So I would like to put on record that Indonesia can go along and can join the consensus to have and accept this preambular as it stands. Thank you, Madam President.
Les agradezco la...
I'd like to thank those delegations that have spoken at this time. Of the statements I've heard, it is my understanding that there's still a general agreement. And as with all collective processes, there are some delegations that have some preferences. Preferences that they don't feel were perfectly reflected in the text. However, there is a feeling or a sentiment in the majority in the room that this preamble of the text is the text that will stand. I'd like to thank all delegations for their flexibility. Many of you have indicated or stated for the record what your preferences would be and what your vision would be, and you have expressed your support for the text as it currently stands. In any event, I will now continue with a couple of delegations talking this afternoon, but the general feeling is in this room that there is a majority that endorses the text as it currently stands, and that this text is the product of collective joint work during this conference in recent weeks. We will therefore close discussion on the preamble, which is approved by the majority sentiment in the conference, and we will move on to consider Article 1. The preamble is approved ad referendum. I put Article 1 to the conference for its consideration now.
La delegación de...
The delegation of Egypt has a point of order.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I just wanted to take the floor that in the spirit of flexibility, my delegation will go along with the consensus on the preambular section. we have registered our concerns on PP19, and we have registered this in my previous statement. However, for the sake of clarity, Madam President, it is important for my delegation, as we move along during this session, to find some clarity concerning the process or the procedural process as to how we will proceed when we move on going article by article. Because my delegation, with other delegations as well, have sent this final draft to Capitol on Monday evening. And we have received certain comments based on these instructions. And therefore, it is important for my delegation to find clarity from the President as to the procedure as to how these incorporations will be dealt with. Are we here to register our concerns, simply to register them officially during the plenary, or will there be room to consider, even if there are slight amendments that don't necessarily have any opposition from any delegation? As we move along, it is important for my delegation to have clarity from the President, because there are a few concerns that my delegation would like to raise during the process of this negotiation, putting into consideration that my delegation will be highly constructive as we move along. However, this clarity is important for my delegation in order to relay back to Capitol as to the procedural process, because it was under that understanding that when we sent back to Capitol this final draft, not final text, to our Capitol, that there was still room to consider some amendments. Thank you.
Quisiera agradecerle a la
I'd like to thank the delegation of Egypt. Let me then clarify the main items in our manner of proceeding. We will proceed article by article. We'll hear from delegations that wish to take the floor. Of course, we will identify those areas where there's a general agreement of the conference and general feeling of the conference is to move forward, and we will indicate that. Indeed, the text needs to be agreed ad referendum today. We also understand that delegations have an opportunity to send the text back to capital cities for consultations, and therefore there's a possibility of addressing very specific issues with delegations, and we would do so with the understanding that we are racing against the clock here. And further, our understanding is that the text needs to be finalized and sent to all delegations 24 hours before its adoption, which means that it has to be distributed at the latest 9 a.m. tomorrow, 6 July. So given that fact, we do have some time today available to us, although I understand we do have a significant limit in terms of interpretation, but we do have time to be able to go through each article and hear from delegations and find the general sentiment or feeling of the room, which we've been building over time. Over the last few weeks, and especially in the last few days, we've all been working very hard to build that consensus, and it's reflected in the text that we have before us. Let me reiterate, it's true, as it happens in all multilateral negotiations, that the text seeks to find a middle path, and it will not 100% reflect each and every individual position, but rather the collective position of the conference as a whole.
These are points of order? These are points of order? Hay dos delegaciones.
Two delegations have requested the floor. My question to you is, do you have points of order? Netherlands, do you have a point of order?
Tiene la palabra.
I give the floor to the delegation of the Netherlands.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, with regards to the conclusion you just made on the preamble, I'm happy that you mentioned the word majority there, because I would like to register that at this stage my delegation did not agree to the text at referendum, but I don't want to hold up proceedings, just wanted to state that for the record. I would like furthermore to make a little bit, or build a bit about the question by the delegation from Egypt and your response. We expressly see the whole text, we see the text as a whole. That's one thing. So our assessment of one particular article is very often dependent on the outcome on others. So in that sense, I would like to make a general reservation on the whole text. But in order for us to proceed, our delegation will not make comments on every specific article in the OPs that will be coming up. We will make some. And I would also like to flag at this stage that my delegation came here in the, with the idea or with the supposition that we would be able to have, that there would be room for text suggestions, which now it seems there is hardly any. And I will nevertheless, I will not make the specific text suggestions. I will refer to the text suggestions that we had in mind. I will not put them forward literally or read them because we don't want to necessarily hold up the proceedings. But at this stage, I would just like to flag, we will judge the text as a whole. We will make comments on some specific articles and some we won't, but that does not necessarily mean that we agree at referendum to those articles. Thank you.
Le agradezco a la delegación.
I thank the delegation of the Netherlands, and I thank you for your contribution and your flexibility with regard to the conference, and your position has been reflected in the record. I understand that the delegation of Bangladesh has a point of order.
Thank you, Madam President. We would also join other delegations in thanking you and your team, along with our colleagues from the Secretariat, for your tireless work. We take note of your suggestion on moving forward with these proceedings. We would only suggest that in all fairness and for the sake of maintaining record, you please allow all delegations to express their views. We can perhaps go along with your idea of majority viewpoint on the text and move accordingly in the interest of time. But we can assure you that we would, at least from our delegation, refrain from taking the floor or seeking the floor unnecessarily unless we have specific instructions from Capital. And having said that, there are 2 points that I'm under instruction to convey. One is considering the reference to the disproportionate impact of nuclear weapon activities on indigenous peoples. This is an issue our delegation would indeed support, but for the sake of record, we would like to make the point that here, in the context of this text, indigenous peoples refer to those people or communities who are recognized as such in countries as a population or community with a distinct status from the rest of the population. And secondly, we thank you for having a paragraph on peace and disarmament education. As we had indicated, we would have preferred references to the observance of the International Day for the Elimination of Nuclear Weapons, as well as the notion of a culture of peace in this paragraph. However, again, in the interest of moving forward, our delegation would proceed along with the notion of peace and disarmament education in all its aspects. Thank you very much.
Le agradezco.
I thank the delegation of Bangladesh and all delegations that have expressed their interest in continuing to move forward in considering the text, which, as I've said before, is the result of the collective work of the entire conference over the last few weeks, and even going back as far as March, when we had our first substantive session. We are currently considering Article 1 of the text of the treaty. I'm opening the list of speakers for delegations to speak to Article 1.
Para hacer referencia
to refer to Article 1. 4 delegations have requested the floor: Holy See, Iran, Thailand, the Netherlands, Ecuador, Switzerland, and the list of speakers is closed. Holy See has the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. This actually is a comment on the preambular section. We had our light on before the list of speakers for the preamble was closed, so we would just like to have the chance to make this very brief statement. The Holy See believes the preamble has charted a positive course, grounding the treaty in international humanitarian law. While we are happy with the preamble, we do feel there are 2 changes to be made to strengthen and better frame the treaty, which we will submit to the Secretariat for the record. Thank you.
Le agradezco a la delegación.
I thank the delegation of the Holy See. The delegation of Iran has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, I have 2 substantive comments and 1 editorial, very general editorial one. First, on the substantive comments on this article, which indeed is the core of the treaty. In our view, it still needs to clearly refer to the prohibition of the transit of the nuclear weapons. In our view, if we would like to reach a world free of nuclear weapons, we need to completely and very explicitly prohibit the transition of any nuclear weapons. During the negotiation, we supported the proposal by Ecuador, and in our view, it still believe there is a room to put it here. So, we, even if assuming that all countries present here to join the treaty without the prohibition of the transit of nuclear weapons, then the nuclear weapon state would not be under pressure to put aside their nuclear weapons, and they can easily transfer their nuclear weapons from one area to the other area. The other substantive comment I would like to put on the record is with regard to the testing. We suggested that we don't have any problem to put the prohibition of the tests as it was appeared in subparagraph A. However, our preference and strong position was that to prohibit all types of testing, including the subcritical and computer simulation, which does not reflect that in the text. The last comment, which is an editorial one, and I believe this is the job of your team to go through the text to make it consistent. Here in this article, we see that there are references to nuclear weapons, some of them with the addition of the any, some without that, and for a legal and sound text, a legal text of a treaty, it is would be wise to go through the text and to make it consistent. All the text together. These are not the only the one. We noticed that there are some other areas which we directly transfer to your team, to the Secretariat. The inconsistency with regard to the editorial and typing of the text. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Le agradezco.
I thank the delegation of Iran, whose vision has been reflected in the record, and we will be reviewing the issues that he has raised. Clearly, yesterday, there was a legal revision of the text, but we will return to do an additional revision of the text. Given the importance of the text, it deserves it. The delegation of Thailand has the floor, followed by the Netherlands.
Thank you, Madam President. We thank the President for the revised draft and for the plan as outlined by the President. We acknowledge that important discussions have taken place in the past few weeks, which to us is a good sign of good faith negotiations. In our view, the revised draft is integral towards adoption of a strong treaty on Friday. We thank all delegations for the constructive spirit, and we urge this same spirit of cooperation in order to lead us towards a concrete outcome at the end of the week. For Thailand, there are elements that we wish to reference or have referenced differently in the draft treaty. This includes referencing military preparations and planning in Article 1. We also wish to have increased clarity in Article 1D and subsequent Article 4 on the geographical scope of a state's party's jurisdiction or control, which should cover the continental shelf and the exclusive economic zone. In this regard, we request the Secretariat to put on record in the travel repertoire that there is an understanding the phrase any place under its jurisdiction or control wherever it appears in the text of this treaty, to include the continental shelf and the exclusive economic zone of the state party. Madam President, this is our wish list. However, we also recognize the other views expressed at the conference. We are mindful of the enormity and the complexity of our task. It was never going to be easy, yet here today we have an extraordinary opportunity to move forward together the values and the objectives that we share. We wish to support the current revised draft, the revised text rather. Lastly, the delegation of the Kingdom of Thailand expresses our continued support to the President in this joint endeavor and thank her team and the Secretariat for their support to the UN conference. Thank you.
Le agradezco.
I thank the delegation of Thailand also for their words and for recalling for us the long path behind us and what remains before us in this conference. The delegation of the Netherlands, followed by Ecuador.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I will be brief. I would like to register our continued concern with the lack of definitions with regards to the prohibitions. And I would like to reiterate that the article as it currently stands is not likely to be compatible with our commitments as a member of NATO. Is not compatible. With that, I leave it. Thank you.
Le agradezco a Países Bajos.
I thank the Netherlands. I give the floor to the delegation of Ecuador, followed by Switzerland. Thank you very much. Madam President, first I'd like to thank you for your efforts, as well as those of your team, to bring us to this point in the conference. We'd also like to congratulate the facilitators for their transparency exercised in the task that you commended to them. Ecuador believes that as a whole, the text reflects the positions that we have taken over the last few weeks. Therefore, we are prepared to endorse the draft treaty before us. Specifically on Article 1, although we would have preferred to see an explicit ban on transit of materials for nuclear purposes and their financing. However, the delegation of Ecuador believes that these prohibitions and bans are implicit in the prohibition on ongoing assistance in subparagraph E of Article 1. Specifically, we'd like to highlight that these clauses of Article 1 that prohibit assistance, deployment of nuclear weapons also prohibit the transit of ships or airplanes through any party to this treaty and through their airspace or sea space based on land and air and sea law. It also prohibits the coordination of ships and airplanes carrying nuclear weapons that cannot be welcomed in the ports and airports of state parties to this treaty. Ecuador also believes that these very same clauses with regard to installation, assistance, or deployment of nuclear weapons prohibits a state party for preparing to deploy nuclear weapons. Also, subparagraph E references assistance along with the obligation to nationally implement provisions of the article of the treaty under Article 5 imply that state parties are prohibiting their citizens from financing any activities that are prohibited by the treaty. Moreover, with regard to subparagraph A of Article 1, the delegation of Ecuador believes that the prohibition of testing, which would include nuclear weapons or non-nuclear or nuclear explosive or non-explosive devices, are also covered. Thank you. Thank you to the delegation of Ecuador. The delegation of Switzerland has the floor, followed by Colombia and a group of countries that have requested the floor on Article 1. Switzerland, followed by Colombia.
Madam President, at the outset, I would like to thank you and your whole team for all your efforts and the revised version of the text we are here, have here in front of us. My delegation has a major concern with regard to Article 1 and more precisely with the inclusion of test in under A. Our concern is to be seen in connection with nothing least than the very treaty. The very mandate, excuse me. Our mandate states that we have to negotiate a treaty that both complements and strengthens the disarmament and non-proliferation regime. Now, to be once again pragmatic and constructive, I do not want to block agreement on Article 1, but I will have to come back with more detail with regard to this expressed concern in the context of Article 18. Moreover, as I have the floor with regard to Article 1, I would like to put on the record that for my delegation, the treaty has to guarantee the inalienable right of all states to develop research, production, and use of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. The right of all states to participate in exchange of equipment, materials, and scientific and technological information for the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. The legitimate security interest of all states regarding the conduct of research and development in CBRN protection, including cooperation with states not parties. And military cooperation with the states not party to the treaty, that is cooperation and operation with the states which might engage for their part in activities prohibited to a state party. Based on discussions over the last weeks, we conclude that the activities just mentioned are not affected by the obligations under this treaty, and accordingly that all states party may engage in these types of cooperation as long as this cooperation is not undertaken knowingly and with a view to contravene the prohibitions under Article 1. Specifically, we would underline that military cooperation and operations with states not party to this treaty, which might engage for their part in activities prohibited to a state party, is not affected by this treaty. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Le agradezco a la delegación.
I thank the delegation of Switzerland. Colombia has the floor, followed by Malaysia. Thank you very much, Madam President. I'd like to thank you for this new version of the treaty being presented today. And although it's not ideal, I think it attempts to condense all the positions of various countries. If I may, I'd like to make a quick reference to the preamble. We regret that there was no inclusion to the NPT, the proposal that we sent in. We think it would complement with the other instruments, and it's necessary to include it in the preamble because it shows the universalization and of the treaty and the fact that it would be binding. As to Article 1 now, I'd like to start with the reference to testing. This subparagraph should include application or not of the provisions without prejudice to what is set forth in 2B and 4.2 for nuclear weapons possessing states, which currently are not party to the treaty. Also, under this issue, there's a legal vacuum in the treaty for those who possess nuclear weapons under the same circumstances, that if they accede to the treaty, they must adhere to the prohibitions of it. For subparagraph D, on the use or threat of use, currently, my delegation feels that there is a legal vacuum with regard to the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons and the legal consequences thereof from an international law perspective. With the current international legal order, there's no specific reference to this that would categorize it as a crime or that establishes it prohibition. Likewise, with regard to the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons as a possible way of transferring HIV, there's no specific reference to that, as there is none for nuclear weapons. And finally, Madam President, I'd like to reference subparagraph G, which should include application or not of 2C and without prejudice to application of those for possessors of nuclear weapons, which currently would accede to the treaty. And there's a legal vacuum in that a nuclear weapon state, if they want to accede, they would have to under the provisions and prohibitions in this treaty. Thank you.
Le agradezco la delegación de Colombia.
I thank the delegation of Colombia. Malaysia has the floor, followed by Guatemala.
Thank you, Madam President. Regarding Article 1, we believe that this is the core of this treaty and reflects our consultations in the past 3 weeks and also what was possible in those consultations. And we can accept what it is in this text. Since I have the floor, Madam President, may I also take this opportunity to mention, as many other delegations have, that in our view, the text of this treaty as a whole, the treaty that exists before us, this draft before us, is one, it's legally sound, it's feasibly implementable, but also that it sends a very powerful message to everyone that nuclear weapons are prohibited, which is what this conference is for. In the course of the discussions, many efforts had been taken to bring us close together, and we believe that what we have now leads us there. As was mentioned, this effort at nuclear disarmament is not just the past 3 weeks, but it has been ongoing ever since these weapons came about. So in this treaty as a whole, we would like to state on record, while we would have liked certain improvements and changes, we believe that in the spirit of being constructive and flexible and recognizing the bigger picture of where we are in terms of nuclear disarmament and nuclear prohibition, that we need to do this final push to make sure that we get it done and we get the message out of what we're here for, to prohibit nuclear weapons, to lead to their total elimination. I thank you, Madam President.
Le agradezco la delegación de
I thank the delegation of Malaysia, Guatemala, followed by South Africa, and then Singapore. Thank you very much, Madam President. I'd like to thank you and the facilitators for the revised text of the treaty, which we believe, as other delegations have said, is the best possible text. And we believe it's also the result of consultations where all delegations had an opportunity to present their proposals and to hear from all the other delegations and negotiate. The result is based on common denominators. It's a long process, which took place not only in the last few weeks, but also in March and last year during the open-ended working group meetings. On Article 1, which is an article that we believe is fundamentally important to the treaty, we are pleased with the inclusion of the threat of use in subparagraph D, which was not there at the beginning. However, we would like to state for the record that Guatemala would have liked to have seen inclusion of the issue of transit reflected and an explicit ban on preparation of military exercises for nuclear testing. We would like to have seen that in this article, but we will join the consensus and approve the text as it currently stands and hope that other delegations will do likewise. Thank you. I thank the delegation of Guatemala. I now give the floor to the delegation of South Africa, followed by Singapore and then Cuba.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to begin by saying that we endorse your mode of work as you explained to us that you'll go by sensing the majority view. At this point, we think that that's a very wise way to go forward. There are so many things, again, that we would have liked to have had put in Article 1. But we understand that it contains, as is phrased, a delicate balance of the views expressed robustly by delegations over the last 3 weeks. We cannot see a way in which we can ask for things to be added without complicating this any further. So, Madam President, South Africa will accept this as it stands, on the understanding that it is the best expression of the majority will of this room and the delegates, and it takes us forward. I thank you.
Le agradezco a la
I thank the delegation of South Africa. I'll now give the floor to the delegation of Cuba, followed by Peru. Thank you very much, Madam President. I'd like to state for the record Cuba's position on 2 matters related to Article 1. First, the issue of transit. As you know, the delegation of Cuba, along with many other delegations, stressed that it should be included in Article 1. There should be an explicit prohibition on transit of nuclear weapons. However, in the discussions, the understanding and interpretation of the conference which prevailed was that transit of nuclear weapons is already covered under Article 1 in the provisions that prohibit assistance. We hope that that interpretation of the conference, that the transit of nuclear weapons would be strictly prohibited in virtue of this treaty, is properly reflected in the conference records. Second, relating to the testing, we are satisfied that the most recent language is different now from the prior version, which only prohibited nuclear testing, which included explosions. We'd like to state our position for the record, which is that the prohibition of testing under this treaty includes prohibition of all types of nuclear testing, and that includes those tests which take place using non-explosive methods. Thank you.
Le agradezco a la delegación de
I thank the delegation of Cuba. I now give the floor to the delegation of Singapore, followed by Peru. I also have Kazakhstan, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ghana. And if there are no other delegation who wishes to take the floor, I would then close the list of speakers on this topic. The delegation of Singapore has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, Singapore appreciates the efforts that you and your team have undertaken in drafting the latest text, which was circulated on 3rd July 2017. We note that, like many other delegations, not all our proposals were incorporated in the revised text. Notably, in conjunction with Article 1, Singapore had proposed language entirely consistent with the obligations and rights accorded by the Schonfest Treaty, the Treaty of Bangkok. Our language was based verbatim on Article 7 of the Schonfest Treaty and is included in the compilation text that had been circulated. My delegation had participated constructively in the informal consultations and small group consultations. At those meetings, we had elaborated on the rationale for our proposal. Nevertheless, we have listened carefully and appreciate the comments put forward by other colleagues, and would like in particular to place on record our appreciation to Ambassador Commissario of Mozambique for his tireless efforts to try to forge consensus on this article, which represents a core component of the treaty in our view. While we stand by our proposal and the position that we have outlined, we have heard and taken into account comments from other delegations appealing for flexibility at this late stage. In order to facilitate our collective work, Singapore will not stand in the way of consensus on Article 1 at this point in time. We nevertheless ask that our position be placed on record. I thank you, Madam President.
Le agradezco a la delegación de
I thank the delegation of Singapore. Peru has the floor, followed by Kazakhstan. Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to thank you for all of your efforts, as well as the Secretariat and the facilitators. If I could, I'd like to briefly highlight two issues. First, my delegation is very pleased to see that suggestions made by all delegations were included in this new text. For my delegation, we're very pleased to see that Article 1, subparagraph D, includes the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons or other nuclear explosive devices. Moreover, from my delegation, we would like to have seen Article 1 text also include the explicit prohibition of transit and financing. However, Madam President, in order to be constructive and to achieve an agreed-upon text, my delegation will accept the text of Article 1 as it currently stands, with the understanding that the expression of the majority of the delegations is reflected here, but we'd like to state for the record that transit and financing are included under assistance, encouragement, or induction, as reflected in subparagraph E. Thank you. I thank the delegation of Peru. Kazakhstan has the floor, followed by Cote d'Ivoire.
Thank you, Madam Chair, again. Kazakhstan considers this treaty as a comprehensive prohibition of nuclear weapon. Prohibition in all possible aspects. In this regard, the treaty should contain a prohibition on transit, financing, and preparation. Moreover, we also support the idea that testing should extend to non-explosive and subcritical levels. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Tiene la palabra la delegación.
Thank you. Côte d'Ivoire, followed by Ghana. Côte d'Ivoire has the floor.
Côte d'Ivoire tiene la palabra.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. My delegation is very pleased with how you have led our work and you have reached this successful result. Nevertheless, I would like to ask about what is going to follow, what the process is going to be. You said that you explained how this would be moving forward, and I noticed that the versions in the other languages are not available yet. So I'd like to know when exactly we will be receiving these versions in other languages. I'd also like to know what's going to take place on Friday when we move towards adoption. The General Assembly mandated our work. We have a draft in front of us. Will it be adopted simply here in this room on Friday, or will we move to the General Assembly for its adoption? So these are the questions I wanted to ask. Thank you for giving me the floor.
Sí, para la delegación de Côte d'Ivoire, quisiera informar.
Yes, Côte d'Ivoire. I wish to inform you that we have received information from conference services, namely that translations will be ready tomorrow. Therefore, we hope that tomorrow we will be able to examine the text in all official languages. I would also ask Côte d'Ivoire to recall that we have approved a draft program of work for this week, and it includes that on Friday, 7 July, the text will be adopted. This is in accordance with the call from the General Assembly, namely that this conference must do everything possible to end these negotiations as quickly as possible, negotiations on the draft of this treaty. This is part of the mandate under the General Assembly. Therefore, the conference has already expressed its plan of adopting the text on Friday, 7 July.
Tiene la palabra la delegación de Ghana, seguido de Lesotho.
Ghana has the floor, followed by Lesotho.
Thank you, Madam President, for giving me the floor. We also want to join other delegations in thanking you for your hard work. We believe that we have come very far. Even if we do not have a perfect document, it is the best we can have in the circumstances. At least we have a document that will serve as a compass whilst we as humanity proceeds towards eliminating and prohibiting nuclear weapons entirely. We are happy that testing of nuclear weapons has been prohibited in Article 1. In fact, that was the gap, and we are happy we have filled that gap. We are fortified in this belief because your preambular paragraph 21 does not affect the right of any state party to develop, research, production, and use of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. In this regard, Madam President, Ghana supports your compromise text in Article 1. Thank you.
Le agradezco. Tiene la...
Thank you. Nigeria has the floor now.
Thank you, Madam President, we'll keep emphasizing the fact that you have indeed tried your best regarding the text we have before us. But with regards to Article 1, my delegation would like to have it on record and reiterate that we would have preferred a very explicit and clear prohibition on transit of nuclear weapons within the territories of state parties. This, for us, will have been a form of confidence-building measures. Well, let us also say that, in addition, Madam President, we believe that the mention of the word test in Article 1A, well, while not really satisfying us, but we believe in that it should have been clearly reflect in such a way that it will mean the item will cover various kinds of tests, but we can live by it. Accordingly, we wish to place on record that we consider the current text of Article 1 to infer a prohibition of transit, and we interpret Article 1 to bind all state parties to prohibit testing in all forms of it within their territories. But nevertheless, we, as we said, we appreciate your efforts, even as we move on. Thank you, Madam President.
Le agradezco a la delegación de Nigeria. Tiene la...
Thank you, Nigeria. Lesotho.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Let me first start by thanking you and commending you and your team for the wonderful work you have done so far. My delegation welcomes the draft treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons and has no objection to the Article 1 as it is, and agree to the language used therein, especially the inclusion of threaten to use nuclear weapons in paragraph D in Article 1. My delegation believes that the text in its current form is worthy of adoption. Madam President, I thank you.
Le agradezco, delegación de Lesotho. Tiene la palabra ahora el...
Thank you, Lesotho. The International Committee of the Red Cross has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, Madam President, let me congratulate you and your team on the tremendous efforts and hard work that you have put in overseeing the negotiation conference and the development of this draft treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. Your dedicated efforts and those of all of the delegations at this conference have led to what is, in the view of the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, a strong normative instrument. In March, the ICRC identified 3 objectives that we believed were essential for this treaty. First, that the treaty recognize and respond to the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons. Secondly, that the treaty be grounded on the principles and rules of international humanitarian law. And thirdly, that the treaty contain clear and robust prohibitions. In the view of the ICRC, Madam President, each of these goals are achieved by the current text, specifically in the preamble and in Article 1, the prohibitions. Indeed, the ICRC believes that the draft treaty delivers on the promise of a clear and comprehensive prohibition of nuclear weapons. Madam President, in his statement to the high-level opening of this conference on the 17th of March, the President of the ICRC, Peter Maurer, indicated that the adoption of a treaty grounded in international humanitarian law and establishing a clear prohibition of nuclear weapons would be an essential and historic step towards bringing the era of nuclear weapons to an end. With the current text, we believe this conference would be taking this historic step. Thank you, Madam President.
Le agradezco al Comité Internacional de...
I thank the ICRC. I see no other requests for the floor on the first article. From what I understand, the room would like to adopt the text of Article 1 by majority. So let us now open the list of speakers on Article 2. And I ask you to be as brief as possible, seeing as this is a slightly more simple article. Thank you. We need to use the time at our disposal to the best possible. I now open the floor. Please signal if you wish to take the floor. Cuba has the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam President. With regard to Article 2, and in reference to the statements made, the Cuban delegation would like to state its position that without prejudice to what is set forth in Article 1, Paragraph 1 of Article 2, without prejudice to what's set forth there, all state parties to the treaty will have an obligation of including in their statements information on implementation of any of the activities that are banned by Article 1 of the treaty. Thank you very much, Madam President. I thank the delegation of Cuba, Iran, followed by the Netherlands.
Thank you, Madam President. On this article, we don't have any problem with the substance. We have two, again, points which, in our view, legally speaking, if we want to have a sound text of the treaty, we need to be consistent. Here in subparagraph B and C, we use the word notwithstanding. Also in Article 4, paragraph 2 and 3, we use the same. While in other area in the text, when we want to refer to a different situation, we use without prejudice in Article 3, and again in Article 4, we use 5 times the word without prejudice. We asked our legal expert in Capital and here, and they suggested to us that if we want to be consistent with the international treaty, like the Convention of Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties, we need to use the without prejudice, which in substance there is no difference, but it is legally speaking would be wise to use the same. So we suggest in subparagraph B, C, and also in paragraph 2 and 3 of Article 4, we use without prejudice instead of using notwithstanding. In addition, we know that notwithstanding might have a negative quotation, which we should refrain from. The other point we have with regard to the consistency, here in paragraph 2, we asked the Secretary General to transmit the declaration here to the state party. Just we would like to remind that in other articles, in Article 4, we also have declaration, the final declaration on the completion of the destruction, and another declaration in paragraph 4 of the Article 4. So if we want to be consistent, since the title of this article is declarations, we suggest to add after the word all such declaration and other declaration under Article 4, so we do not miss the declarations under other articles. These are just editorial, just we want to complete the text of the Article 2. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the delegation of Iran, the Netherlands, followed by Palestine.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. With regards to Article 2, with your permission, I'll take 2, 3, and 4 together, as we see them as a single thing. There is, of course, again, the relation with Article 1 and the verifiability of all the things in there. But verification is, of course, also very much relevant in Article 2. We have difficulty to see how the categories that states declare themselves to be could be verified. This means that the declarations can probably not be used as baselines, but maybe perhaps as a base for transparency measures, but these do not provide the level of assurance needed for a treaty banning nuclear weapons. With regards to Article 3, we again would like to reiterate that we would like to see a higher verification standard. We understand there is not a majority for that in this room, but higher verification standards will be required if we want to move forward to disarmament. And with regards to Article 4, it has in fact improved, and we thank also delegations that for their constructive efforts in the informals. But the fact remains that we are trying to set up strict rules for hypothetical future situations, of which the technical and political parameters are impossible to predict or legislate for. In plenary and informals, we asked for a case of maximum flexibility to prevent that the treaty actually complicates, instead of eases accession by possessor states. Coupled with the principle that the meeting of state parties has to approve any agreement, this would ensure future effectiveness. So in that sense, instead of the lengthy text we have in Article 4 now, we would strongly prefer a far shorter one that enables us to be more flexible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Netherlands. I give the floor to Palestine, followed by Mozambique, and then South Africa. Palestine.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. Palestine wishes to say the position that statements must be taken into account through the full range of prohibited items under Article 1 of our treaty. Thank you, Madam President.
Le agradezco la delegación de...
I thank the delegation of Palestine, Mozambique, followed by South Africa.
I thank you, Madam President. I also wish to express our thanks for the manner in which you have been conducting our work. And we have, thanks to your dedication and devotion, we have now a very good text for our treaty. We wish to place on record our full support to the whole text before us, and therefore we will probably not be asking for the floor in many other future articles that will be put before delegations. Let me, if you allow me, Madam President, underline that in our opinion, you have been conducting extremely well our proceedings. We also think that it is very correct that you are asking now for the views of delegations in this important process of negotiations. It is always wise that we listen to everyone, and every opinion is taken into account, and where possible accommodate within the deadline that we have. But we should not prevent delegations from expressing their views, and this is an expression of fairness, justice, and democratic methods in our work. Now, on this Article 2, like the delegation of Iran, I think, I was also a little bit puzzled with this notwithstanding Article 1. Because in our understanding, it is exactly because of Article 1 that you have to declare whether you possess or do not possess nuclear weapons or other explosive devices or control. It is because, exactly because Article 1 prohibits those activities that states, one, must be transparent and say what is their status, their position, and two, as a consequence of the Article 1, what measures are they prepared to take in the future? So here, rather than notwithstanding, it should be more in light as a consequence or something like that. So I do not have an exact expression at this moment, but notwithstanding does not appear to be a very good expression. Of course, I'm not an English speaker, I'm a Portuguese speaker, so probably my understanding is incomplete and wrong. Thank you, Madam President.
Le agradezco.
I thank the delegation of Mozambique, and we recognize Ambassador Combasario for his profile as a great legal expert. And we admire what he said. And we'll take a look at what you just mentioned, the issue you just raised. We'll examine that. South Africa, followed by New Zealand.
Thank you, Madam President. My delegation takes Article 2, 3, 4 as a package. And we understand the intense discussions that took place around these articles and the effort that went into taking into account sensitivities. And we can live with it as a package as it stands because we know what it took to get it, to get all three paragraphs in the shape in which they are. I think an effort was also spent in trying to anticipate changes globally. I imagine the drafters of the NPT, the 18 countries that drafted originally, the NPT, engaged in a similar exercise, but could not have foreseen all possibilities. This is the nature of multilateralism. We do the best we can to anticipate, and we try to articulate it as best as we can into language. And we think that these paragraphs do that. Again, we have our own wishes as South Africa. We would have wished that they were expressed in a different way, but we understand that we're engaged with other parties and we must find a way in which we meet each other halfway. Our simple understanding, English is not my language too. I'm Xhosa speaking. My simple understanding as a Xhosa speaker is that notwithstanding in this case means you can join even if you possess nuclear weapons. This is very important for us in signaling to nuclear weapon states that you can join and then embark upon the processes that require. It may not be an elegant way of bridging this delicate situation that we were trying to bridge, but we think that notwithstanding serves the purpose in this context. Taking the amount of hours that were spent in facilitating this and the skill and the robust discussions that took place, we can live with Article 2 taken together with Article 3 and 4. I thank you, Madam President.
Le agradezco a la delegación.
I thank the delegation of South Africa. I give the floor to the delegation of New Zealand.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I'm going to take this opportunity also to express New Zealand's gratitude for all the work that has gone into the second revision of the draft treaty, and work which has been led by you, your team, and the Secretariat, but which we know does also reflect a great deal of effort on the part of all delegations here in this room. With some nervousness, because I confess to being a native speaker of English, I'd like to express my support for what South Africa has said regarding the import of the notwithstanding language. In my view of the English language, I would see this as entirely appropriate. Noting what the Iranian delegation has said, my comment in response to their view would be that without prejudice is an entirely neutral formulation. And in fact, in the context of Articles 2, 3, 4, we don't need a neutral formulation because we're needing to rectify what is otherwise an overt inconsistency within the text. And therefore, the use of notwithstanding is that it is an acknowledgement that there is inconsistency, and it's establishing a hierarchy. So with some diffidence about the English language, I would agree with South Africa that notwithstanding is right. Notwithstanding that, Madam President, I do think it will be important that we get our reference to the subparagraphs exactly accurate, and I think there is some tweaking of the reference to the specific paragraphs in Article 1 that we need to look at. And finally, Madam President, just while I have the floor, I think it's very useful that delegations here are taking this opportunity to place on record their views, their interpretive views on some of the text that we have now put in place in this draft. But I'd like to register New Zealand's disquiet. We may agree or we may not agree with some of those interpretive declarations, but certainly New Zealand does not accept that any individual statement given here purporting to be a declaration of the view for the entire membership here. New Zealand does not accept that. We do not agree necessarily with the views put forward, and we do not accept that any individual delegation's view is the view of the entire membership. Thank you, Madam President.
Le agradezco a la delegación de...
I thank the delegation of New Zealand. I understand the feeling of the conference in that we're going to accept Article 2 ad referendum, and I suggest we move on to consider Article 3 of the text then. The list of speakers on Article 3 is now open. I give the floor to the delegation of the Netherlands, followed by Argentina.
Thank you, Chair. Just to flag again our general reservation, because you said is agreed by at referendum. At this stage, I reiterate that my delegation cannot join any article at referendum at this stage. Thank you.
La delegación de Argentina tiene...
The delegation of Argentina. Thank you, Madam President. First, I'd like to join other delegations in thanking you and the facilitators for your excellent work. We have a very good text for our consideration, and my delegation understands that delegations are perfectly able to take the floor and express their views, regardless of what it is that they wish to express as a point of view, with the desire to reach an agreement, and we didn't think there was any precondition for this session. In that regard, my delegation would like to propose that in Article 3, paragraph 1, and I'll read in English,
Its International Atomic Energy Agency safeguards obligations. Se agregue
To that, we should add in particular.
Article 3 of the NPT. Quiero dejar
I'd also like to state for the record that my delegation, throughout the delegations, has taken the floor on a number of occasions to explain our position on this text. And those concepts continue to be in force, and we hope that they can be taken into account, and that this proposal can be taken into account in the exercise that you've put forth to us, and that you would be able to take into account specific proposals and see if you can still accommodate specific suggestions to come to an acceptable text. Thank you.
Le agradezco.
I thank you. The delegation of Switzerland has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Regarding Article 3.1, I would like to put on the record the following elements. We do regret that it was not possible to include in this article a provision encouraging states parties to adhere to the highest level of safeguards existing. All states present in this room here have agreed to this notion in other fora. And here we are again at the concern expressed before, a concern directly linked to the very mandate. The absence of such a provision raises questions, indeed, regarding whether this article is in line with our mandate to complement and strengthen the existing nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime, and regarding whether we are not weakening the existing acquis, which would be against our mandate. In our view, the absence of such a provision weakens the text and is likely to be leveraged by those skeptical towards this treaty. Thank you very much.
Le agradezco a la delegación.
I thank the delegation of Switzerland. There are no other delegations wishing to take the floor on Article 3. I understand the feeling of the room that there is a general agreement on Article 3.
¿Tiene un punto de orden?
Point of order? The delegation of Argentina has a point of order. I have a question, perhaps for another delegation. Is this just to put our position on record or break the consensus? We're not very clear on why we would be here. We have tried to avoid arguing our position because our considerations are known and our arguments are very similar to those that were just expressed by the delegation of Switzerland. However, if delegations are going to make a proposal for then you to continue and say that we all agree, then we can go through the session very quickly. But we would hope that delegation suggestions could be taken into account one way or another. Thank you.
Voy a reiterar.
I will reiterate what I had clarified at the beginning of this session. The text we have before us is the sum total of the collective work of this conference and all delegations present over the last 2 weeks. All delegations had a significant opportunity to put forth their suggestions to discuss them, especially Articles 2 to 5. That was one of the blocks of articles that was most debated and discussed by this conference, both in plenary and in the facilitated sessions. This is not a time for consideration of specific proposals. That phase has been concluded. That phase actually was concluded when consultations were held, facilitated by a number of colleagues who are here in the room as well. And I'd like to thank those facilitators for their intensive work. At this time, we are not here for considering specific proposals. The text is the best sum up of all the discussions that have been held to date during this conference. So what we're currently doing is reviewing the text so that at the end of the day, it can be finished and we can complete the review of it, and it can then be sent to you for adoption. At the latest, it will be sent to you 9 a.m. Thursday, which I mentioned at the beginning of this session.
La conferencia hoy.
The conference will now consider Article 4 of the text before us. I'm opening the list of speakers for those delegations that wish to address the text of Article 4.
La delegación.
The Netherlands has the floor, followed by Iran.
Y Colombia.
And then Colombia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're of course in your hands on how to deal with treating this text and reviewing this text. But my question now would be, because there really does not seem to be any room for text changes, is this the text you're going to circulate tomorrow, or is there going to be a Ref 3? Could there be a Ref 3, or is it just going to be this? Thank you.
I'd like to respond to the delegation of the Netherlands that just asked a question asking whether there was a new revised version to this text. And I was commenting that the text that we have before us, which is the sum total of all the work of this conference, is what we are endeavoring to go over so that we can conclude it today. Of course, this presidency will continue having consultations with delegations with a view to identifying technical matters that might still be pending. And that is with the understanding that these are issues that have been thoroughly discussed from a political point of view, a normative point of view, or a technical point of view. That's what I was explaining earlier this morning.
La delegación de Irán.
The delegation of Iran, followed by Colombia, and then Palestine.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to reiterate the comment I made on Article 2 with regard to the word notwithstanding, and indeed notwithstanding with the explanation made by New Zealand as a native speaker, still we believe that if we want to have a legally sound text, we need to be consistent with the treaties, especially the Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties, and we should be consistent in whole text. Wherever we are referring to different situation, we should use the without prejudice, as we have used 5 times without prejudice in the draft. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Le agradezco a la delegación de Irán.
I thank the delegation of Iran. I give the floor to the delegation of Colombia. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Madam President. On Article 4, subparagraph, one moment, please. Subparagraph 2. With regard to the reference competent reference authority, we would once again point to the experiences and practices of the organization in the area of verification. We'd like to highlight the importance of that. Thank you. Thank you, Colombia. Palestine, followed by Thailand.
Thank you, Madam President. We had taken the floor to discuss the issue of the process, just for us to be a bit more comfortable and have more clarity also about it. I think it's our view, and it's maybe also normal to think that if there is a point on which there is strong views of the membership, a strong majority that would require a change, then a change would occur to the text. And when there is a strong view, an overwhelming majority in favor of keeping the text as it is, then it is logical to keep the text as is. We have seen till now overwhelming majority in favor of maintaining the text as is, but we hope as we proceed, if there is any suggestion that receives wide support, that it will be duly considered, because we've gone back to capitals in order to get our instructions, and this is a chance for us to comment on this draft and also, if possible, to improve it, as long as any proposal has a strong and clear majority in its favor. Thank you, Madam President.
Le agradezco a la delegación.
I thank the delegation of Palestine. I give the floor to the delegation of Thailand.
Thank you, Madam President. On Article 4, we wish to commend the work by Ambassador Helena Nolan on bridging positions on a difficult topic. Nonetheless, we continue to be of the view that the title of the article should be Total Elimination of Nuclear Weapons, expressing the obligations spelled out in this section of the treaty, which is to eliminate nuclear weapons. Thank you, Madam President.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the delegation of the Philippines.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as it is our first time to take the floor, we'd like to compliment not just the chair, but all the delegations who have shown a strong support and commitment to this process. Apropos of the process, I think it's very important to look at the how instead of the what. I don't think our conference would like to come up with an outcome document that is there for the sake of an outcome document. We do not want to create a Frankenstein that will hound us after the end of our deliberations today. I will paraphrase what the President had said. Today's conference is the sum total of collective work of this conference. Number two, delegations have had ample opportunity to discuss the items here, and we are not here to consider specific proposals. I pose the question, Madam President, that if the three above were not the case, then this conference should be able to address technical and procedural issues which have, in certain instances, hounded our very important conference today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No hay más delegaciones.
I see no other delegations requesting the floor on the subject of Article 4. I will respond to what the delegation of the Philippines just said.
¿Cuál es el resultado final que
What is the final result or outcome that is hoped for from this conference? To have a legally binding instrument? What's the expected result of that? We're talking about a document which is a legally binding document, a legal document. It's one that's been discussed by the whole conference over several weeks. We had a first draft of the text, which was distributed in May, then a first revision of the text on the 27th of June. We have another revision of the text, which is the product of all the deliberations of the working groups, and those were facilitated. And at this stage of the process, we are reviewing the text with the understanding that the conference has been working towards this moment collectively to have a text with which they will feel comfortable so that we can get to Friday and approve it. Clearly, we're listening to a number of people raising specific issues, including the presidency. We'll be able to continue having dialogues with delegations that have expressed these views. That does not mean that the text before you, before all of you at this moment in time, is not a text that hasn't been worked on by the entire conference. Indeed, it is the understanding, because we've been getting the reports from the working groups, some of which even we personally were involved in. It is the understanding that this text is what we've been working on in the different working groups. Therefore, at this moment in time, we are seeking to conduct a final review of the text, and the goal is to identify those issues or those delegations with which the presidency can continue having consultations with a view to seeing if we can accommodate their concerns. But bearing in mind also the fact that the text that we have before us did not show up here this morning without all of your agreement. To the contrary, this text reflects the work of all of us, of the entire conference. We'll continue then, moving forward. We have 5 minutes left in this morning's session, and then we'll take a break and come back at 3 o'clock. During the lunch hour, we'll have consultations with those delegations that have raised some issues and that they wish to communicate, and they can work with the presidency on them. And we can also look at the process and a means of achieving a consensus. We will resume this afternoon at 3 to continue considering the text, reviewing the text. This is the text of the conference. It's the text which is the result of the collective work of the conference. And in that regard, I hope that you can all exercise the same spirit of compromise which we've all been exercising over the last few weeks of the work of the conference, in order to find those points that can be reflected in a document that will reflect the common ground of our discussions. My interpretation of the feeling of this conference is that this is the result of the work of each and every one of us over the last 3 weeks and during the March session. We will adjourn this morning's session, and we will resume this afternoon at 3 p.m. And we will continue with Article 5 onwards of the treaty text. The session is adjourned.